guys, welcome back to another video. I want to talk today about Avowed because we've been hearing a lot about Avowed recently and just over the last few months, lots of information on the game itself. We've seen lots of gameplay, we've seen dialogue. It looks like it is going to be a ton of fun. We've seen the exploration. We've heard about the endings, over 10 plus endings that they're going to be in this game. So there's going to be lots of choice, and it seems like it is just one of those Obsidian RPGs that if you're a fan of Obsidian games, you are going to enjoy Avowed. But when it comes to first-party Xbox releases, they have been plagued by release issues or by release controversies that kind of bring down the excitement before the game does come out. Something that I think Xbox needs to try to get a handle on, get a grasp on, or these things will take over the discussion rather than being focused on the game itself. We've seen previews of Avowed from Gamescom, and everyone is saying great things about it. But now we have a new discussion that is occurring, and that is the performance or lack of performance mode for Avowed that could be there or not be there, I should say, when it does launch. This comes via an interview with Lord Cognito and Mr. Matty Plays, who were speaking with some developers there, the art directors of the game itself, and they talk about the 30 frames per second mode and that being the baseline for the game. And we'll just play the clip here. This is what they have to say.
You could talk about this part right now, but I was curious about console performance, specifically the Series X. Can we talk frame rates at this time, or we're waiting a little?
Well, I'm
not yet.
Probably not the best person to. Oh, sorry, talking off mic. I'm probably not the best person to talk about that. We can probably. We can probably.
Yeah, I mean, nitty gritty of it. Performance is one of the last things we figure out, right? We are core, and I think we've announced this elsewhere. We are core targeting 30 frames per second bare minimum. Like that's the expectation. It's a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need that 60 frames, and that allows us to get a lot juicier with VFX and lighting and all this other stuff. So it's a trade-off we opted to make relatively early, and we're really happy with that. I mean, the game's running pretty smooth for how visually dense it is, and that was always our goal. But as far as like a greater understanding of performance spec, we're still figuring all that out. It's one of the last things you do. So, yeah.
So there you have it. They are saying here that the bare minimum of 30 frames per second on the Xbox Series X and S consoles. Now, that does not confirm that there will only be a 30 FPS mode on the console itself, but it is kind of sounding like that, as he is saying that's what they're targeting on, and they haven't really gone into the performance side of things. That's one of the last things that they do. And this kind of brings into question, for one, the delay, because originally I was thinking, a lot of people were thinking they were just solely delaying this game because they wanted to get it out of that November release month where there's a bunch of other games that were being released and they didn't want to be caught up between all that. Pushing it to February gives it a little bit of time to breathe, but now even February is looking pretty packed. It makes you question whether the delay for this game was to get a little bit more time to work in that performance mode. So we won't know if there is a 60 frames per second mode at launch until later on, until Xbox officially comes out and does make that announcement. As of right now, like they said, they are targeting that bare minimum 30 frames per second within the game. And to me, this is something that will always be a question now when it comes to first-party Xbox games because of the releases of a game like Redfall and a game like Starfield, where both had 30 FPS on the console and then got patched later to get the upgrades to 60 frames per second. And I think this is actually a major thing that Xbox is dealing with, and they have to continue to try to fight against this from their studios. If their studios want to just have a 30 frames per second mode on their first party releases, I think this is the time where Xbox does come in and is a little bit more of the boss in the situation and pushes the fact that they need to have a option at the very least to have 60 frames per second. Because for me personally, I played Redfall at launch, played through the whole game, 30 frames per second. I played Starfield at launch, played through the whole game at 30 frames per second. I will play 30 frames per second games. It doesn't affect me as much as it affects a lot of other people out there who will just strictly not play a video game unless there is a 60 FPS mode. I mean, I've been playing video games my whole life. I am very used to low frame rates in video games, so it doesn't affect me, but it isn't my preference. If I had to choose, whenever there's quality and performance mode, I am always going over to the performance mode and selecting that, even if the quality mode is just eye-popping and looks phenomenal. I think about a really good quality / performance mode, the Avatar, the Frontiers of Pandora. The quality mode was beautiful. Game was beautiful. And it was really good. It was stable, played very nicely in quality mode, but I still opted for that performance mode, which took a bit away from the beauty of the world that they create there, just to have that extra smoothness. And with Avowed, I would absolutely do the same thing here. It's a first-person game. I know they mentioned it doesn't really matter because it's a first-person single-player experience, but in my opinion, first-person games should really always try to get that 60 FPS mode. And we are going to see now, because of this, and because of not making sure that 60 FPS is in the game as something to focus on when developing it from the very beginning, we're going to see now discussion of frames per second overtake everything else about Avowed, even if everything else is phenomenal. So I think Xbox absolutely needs to work on this stuff, because we've had Phil Spencer come out, do the apology tour with Redfall. Then we had the Starfield thing with Todd Howard saying that's how he wanted people to experience the game, and that really there wasn't a 60 FPS available. But then obviously they went ahead and updated Starfield to get 60 frames per second, even on the Xbox Series S. You also have the discussion about, is the Xbox Series S holding things back? And I still stand by what I've been saying throughout this entire generation. I do not think it is holding things back. I think it is developers not being able to optimize it, because if you look at the overall scope of the games that have released this generation, more games have been with performance modes on the Xbox Series S than the other way around. So at the end of the day, it is just developers not having the time or wanting to take the time to work out those kinks with the Xbox Series S before the game does get to release. Maybe they're not as skilled. Who knows? I'm not sure the reasoning why, but you see some other games out there that are just fine on the Series S, whether that means dropping the resolutions way down, whether that means taking some of the overall just graphical features, textures, like little things like the lighting, reducing all of those things to get a performance mode on the Xbox Series S. I think that's something that just has to be done, even if it goes against the art director's creative vision. When you're looking at the landscape of gaming and the people playing these games, people want that performance mode, and they want it on console, as that's what was promised to everybody when these consoles did release. So we'll see. I mean, there's other games at Gamescom as well, like Capcom's Monster Hunter Wilds, that apparently is only 30 FPS on consoles, but that's at Gamescom. Will that be at the official release? So the question now is, when these games do come out, will they have performance modes? And the bigger question, now that we're 4 years into this generation, when previously I still think the Series S and the consoles weren't holding things back, are we at an inflection point here where, because games have improved that much over 4 years, I don't know if you really see it in the graphics, but maybe they have, and the engines have gotten a little bit more powerful, are we at this point now where these consoles are at the end of their life cycle, and it is very hard, harder than it was a few years ago, to provide performance mode within games? We'll see the big batch of first-party releases and third-party releases this holiday season over Christmas and everything from September to December. We will see a lot of these games come out, these big AAA games. Do they have performance modes or not? And you'll see. I think most of them will, and most of them will be running fine on the platforms, but there will be ones that are outliers, and those are the ones that people are going to talk about and complain about. And Avowed does not want to be in that situation, especially from what has happened recently with, again, Starfield and Redfall, of course. I just want to talk about that because it's a big talking thing, and people are going to be going over this again and again. Either way, when Avowed comes out, I'll be playing it 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second. Like I said, I still play the games, but if I had a preference, it would be with a performance mode. But I'm going to leave the video there. If you did enjoy this video, hit that thumbs up. If you're new, hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Bye.